Eben has more.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
On September 14th, 2001, as he toured the devastation at Ground Zero, President Bush vowed America would respond.
And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
The White House wanted sweeping powers to bring America's military might to bear on the people who planned and executed 9/11. And it wanted Congress to grant those powers quickly. Within hours of the attacks, White House lawyers started drafting a bill, the Authorization for Use of Military Force, or AUMF. At its core was one simple 60-word sentence authorizing the president to go after al-Qaeda anywhere, anytime, with any force he deemed appropriate. Congressional support for the bill was virtually unanimous, but one congresswoman asked her colleagues to slow down the rush to war.
Some of us must say, let's step back for a moment. Let's just pause just for a minute and think through the implications of our actions today so that this does not spiral out of control.
Representative Barbara Lee of California believed the bill was too vague, too broad, giving the White House a blank check to wage an endless war anywhere in the world. Her friends in Congress urged her to change her mind, but Lee would stand firm, alone, the only no vote in both houses of Congress. For opposing the AUMF, Lee was called a traitor. She received death threats that required 24-hour protection. Since 2001, two presidents have used the AUMF to justify military action in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, and other countries. It paved the way for the drone program, expanded NSA surveillance, Guantanamo Bay, and torture. The question is, how does one little sentence in the AUMF justify so much?
Against al-Qaeda and associated forces.
Associated forces.
Against al-Qaeda and associated forces.
Critics say the AUMF overrides the constitutional power reserved for Congress to declare war.
You're reading this AUMF in such a way as to apply clearly outside of what it says.
There have been multiple attempts to narrow, amend, or even repeal the bill, but so far, all of them have failed. Paul Beeben, Al Jazeera.
And Congresswoman Barbara Lee joins us now from Washington, D.C. Congresswoman, we have a new extended military operation in the Middle East. Does it surprise you that the White House is citing the 2001 authorization for the use of force?
Well, thank you, John. First of all, that answer cuts both ways. The reason I voted against that resolution was that it was so broad. It was a blank check, and it set the stage and the policy for perpetual war. And so on one hand, that resolution, and the Congressional Research Service has documented over 30 times when that has been used in Yemen, Somalia, for domestic surveillance, for many activities that it should not be used for. But again, it was open-ended, it was broad, and it set the stage for the authorization of force into any country at any time by any president in perpetuity. And that's why I really believe we should repeal it. And I have legislation to repeal it. I have about 33 co-sponsors, but we're building a lot of support to get that resolution off the books.
Do you believe that the House should authorize military force against the Islamic State group?
Listen, this is 13 years later. We need to come back to the drawing board. First, we need to repeal the 2001 resolution, and then we need to have a debate. We all agree ISIS is a threat and is a danger.
But would you vote for that?
That's not a question. Let me say, I believe that there are non-military alternatives. There are options that have not been laid out, and that we need to do everything we can to avoid the use of force. And so I'm very reluctant to vote for any resolution that would be open-ended, that would authorize the use of force and put us back to where we were.
Congresswoman, take us back to the days after September 11th, 13 years ago, and your decision to vote against, the single vote against authorization.
Well, I have to tell you, first of all, that day was a tragic day. The horrific attacks, still, you know, we're remembering, we're mourning the lives of those who were taken, the families, friends, communities. I mean, this was a real sorrowful period, and the country was in mourning. As we continued to try to understand what had taken place, the Congress came up with a resolution that was so open-ended, and it was presented 3 days on September 14th after the horrific, terrible attacks. And so that's not the time for members of Congress who were elected by people to make hard decisions in a national security crisis or not.
If you had to do it over again, you would.
As hard as that was, I would. That was the right vote. And I am telling you, the public is war weary. They see now, after 13 years, thousands of our brave young men and women dead. Al-Qaeda is still there. The Taliban is still there. Now we have ISIS. What are we going to have? In 10 more years, ISIS too. So we have to do this differently.
But you got death threats after that vote, didn't you?
Many. It was a horrible period for me and my family. The Capitol Police, to their credit, were excellent, and they helped tremendously in terms of ensuring our safety. But I'm telling you, these were real threats. And what troubled me also during that period is that so many people were so angry and so fearful until they forgot what democracy demands.
Well,
and democracy demands dissent, and even in a time of national security crisis, and didn't really understand the right to dissent and the duty to dissent.
At the time, you thought the bill might lead to an endless war. In some ways, do you feel vindicated 13 years later?
You know, I'm sorry, but I don't want to feel vindicated because too many lives are at stake, and we want a world that is seeking global peace and security. I knew then, you just read the resolution, that any president could use that as the legal authority to use force in perpetuity forever.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee, it's good to have you on the program. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Happy to